We are building the best, worst rosters possible here today on the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast. I'm Kyle Crabbs. He's Joe Marino. We are Locked On NFL Scouting. We want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team's every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. We don't just say it, we live it. Today's episode of Locked On NFL Scouting is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On NFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Joe in Western New York for Bills training camp, taking a break from, is it hot up there?
Yeah, it actually is a little hotter than I was hoping it was going to be. I think the last 2 days it's been like 8 degrees hotter than the average normal temperature. So that wasn't what I had in mind when I came up north.
Yeah, it's it'll bake you up a little bit, but the irony there is I actually thought Dolphins training camp last week was cooler than I was expecting. I mean, there was 2 days of practice where it didn't get into the 90s. I'm like, it's July in South Florida. What's going on here? So I'm glad you're catching up with what I didn't get as we flip-flop who's at home, who's on the road, and fun exercise here to get us started. Not meant to slander any teams, but it's a thought exercise that I had last week. I did the story for A to Z, and it's since changed because we've had some free agent signings. But the objective is this, Joe. You're only allowed to use an NFL franchise once. We have 10 position rooms, and our objective is strategically to select what we think is the worst possible combination of underproven or underwhelming position room at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, offensive line, 5 on offense, defensive tackles, edge defenders, linebackers, corners, and safeties on defense. The non-star team, the all underwhelming roster, however you want to phrase it. Position rooms that have the biggest questions. We're constructing a strategic roster around here today on the show.
Yeah, when you brought this up last week that you were doing this, my mind started spinning, and I was excited that you were agreeable to doing this to start the week because, let's be honest, we did all of our roster review stuff, and I felt like we spent a lot of time talking about the top. I think this kind of gives us an opportunity to discuss some of the position groups across the league that we're concerned about. And so, yeah, I mean, we're not sitting here trying to dog all these teams, but at the same time, they're very questionable rooms, and we're gonna try to build a team that features all the worst of the worst if we can.
Right. So we have not seen each other's rosters. Mine, as I said, has made some changes, and it was like the unraveling, like one of those cartoons where you start pulling on the string and you just keep pulling, and then it just keeps unraveling. So I had a change at one position room, and then I put somebody else that was at a different spot into that spot, and then I had a vacancy somewhere else. So I actually have like 1 or 2 rooms where it's like, I know this isn't the worst that the league has to offer, but there's some strategy with what rooms you're selecting and why. Shall we?
Yeah, because you can only use each team one time, right? So that's the Raiders. The Raiders tried to jump in 3-4 times, but can only use them once.
So let's start with quarterbacks. I think this one had a pretty short list of candidates for me. I went with the New Orleans Saints and their combined less than 300 career pass attempts in the entirety of the room.
I also went with the Saints. I think the only other contender is the Titans, but at least the Titans have the number 1 pick in Cam Ward. We got a couple of, day 2 quarterbacks in Spencer Rattler and Tyler Shuck competing against Jake Haener. So I'll side with the Saints as a room that's less appealing because at least the Titans have Cam Ward.
You had no consideration for the Browns?
I do have consideration for the Browns, but I mean, there's at least Flacco. Pickett has had some level of success. There's 2 rookies. I mean, I thought about him, but I really had it down to those 2 teams.
Okay, so we both went with the Saints. So Saints fans, you're done early. You can cross yourselves off the rest of the way. We won't talk won't talk about any questions we have with any of the rooms. Um, but let's go to running back, and I'll let you reveal first here who you have at running back. This was one where um, maybe a surprising team for some, but I thought this was a pretty easy choice as far as who I chose.
I did too. I went with the Dallas Cowboys, where I think you have two just expired players in Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders, and then
Called him expired.
late day 3 options in Jaden Blue and the Maffa kid from Clemson. I'm not seeing it. I don't get the warm fuzzies about this compilation of backs.
I also have the Dallas Cowboys down. And good luck sorting out how that room shakes itself out for carries throughout the season. I obviously the young guys have some ceiling. Jadon Blue's really explosive, but a lot of the ancillary pieces of the position, ball security, pass protection, they're not strengths, right? So it really does kind of give you this foil of veteran players whose best stages of their careers are very obviously behind them. Now, a wide receiver, this one hurt me to do because there is a good player at the top of this. This was originally, before I started unraveling and replacing, this was originally where I had the Raiders. I do not have the Raiders anymore. I chose to go with the Cardinals here, with obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. in the wide receiver 1 spot, and then it's Dortch and Wilson. And they obviously have a really deep and robust tight end room that takes some of the heavy lift out of the wide receiver room as far as a target share perspective. So if I'm looking at those top 3 as the wide receivers, and Harrison was good as a rookie, but he didn't necessarily quite live up to the billing. And then I have those other players who I think are quality depth players in the wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3 spots. In a world in which I'm not limited on how many times I can use a team, that would not be the team that's sitting here. But as the strategy goes to try to assemble the rest of the entire roster and only use each team once, I went with the Cardinals at wide receiver.
I thought about the Cardinals. I really did. And I didn't land on them. I thought about the Jets, but I thought, man, Garrett Wilson's too good by himself for him to make the list. I wanted to use the Raiders, but I had to use the Raiders somewhere else. That's coming later. I landed on the Panthers. Where, I mean, Ted McMillan's a rookie. I mean, he's a top 10 pick. There's high hopes, but we've never seen him. Yeah. Xavier Leggett didn't necessarily inspire as last year's first-round pick. Adam Thielen as a role player is fine, but, he's late-stage Adam Thielen. Coker is a late-round guy. I just didn't feel like there was a ton of players that you look at and feel like you know exactly what you're getting right now, even if there is some upside with some younger players. So I went with Carolina, but I will say that a lot of that is motivated by me needing to use other teams in other spots.
Yeah, for me, Panthers, once I started pulling the string, Panthers were another team that I looked at really strongly for wide receiver, but I felt like they had enough young guys with enough tools and upside that I went with, okay, like you have a top 10 player in T-Mac versus a top 10 player in Marvin Harrison. Beyond that, who do I like less?
Yeah.
And I like the Cardinals group less. So I'm with the Cardinals. Last team in this block, the tight end position. I'll let you have the floor first here. Who'd you put in at tight end?
I told you before we recorded that there was a position group that had me thinking a lot about. This is the one. This was probably the hardest to settle on the right answer. And I can already feel like that maybe I had a lack of congruency with how I attacked wide receiver versus tight end. But for tight end, I'm picking the Dolphins. Where I like Pharaoh Brown as a number 2 or number 3, but I mean that's your starter right now. And Darren Waller, I don't know what to expect there. If they sign Noah Fant, then obviously this is not going to be the spot for the Dolphins. But I felt like every other intriguing, like even the Jaguars or the Giants were on my short list. I'm like, well, Brenton Strange and Theo Johnson are at least interesting players. Where
I have the Dolphins here as well. They were originally the team that I had at corner, And then the Dolphins signed Jack Jones and Mike Hilton in a 4-hour stretch on Friday. And I was like, well, or on Saturday. And I said, well, I can't keep you a corner anymore because I feel a lot more different about the room. So I put the Dolphins in here. I gave the Panthers some consideration here as well with Jatavian Sanders and Tommy Tremble as the top two guys. And Tremble got a nice contract. But through the skill group, we have 3 of the 4 the same. So we've had a pretty similar strategy thus far, and the Panthers were my runner-up at wide receiver. So we've been very close on the process thus far. Interested to see where things diverge from here. We're going to get into that next here on this episode of Locked on NFL Scouting. Stick with us.
This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. Fantasy football is back. Fire up the group chat. Get your draft board ready and buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions that we live for. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, I'm playing on Yahoo Fantasy like I always do, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran that's making your millionth league. I've used Yahoo Fantasy for years, and I love how smooth the draft day experience is, and our league's been running through Yahoo for a while now. It's easy to set it up. The mobile app is awesome, and the smack talk hits just a little different on the message boards. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. That's all going to begin for you on August 4th. So stay tuned and get started by creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy Football League at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. And let's make this fantasy season the best one yet.
Looking at offensive line, its entirety. We wanted to try to keep the position rooms even and have 5 on either side of the ball. So we put everybody, interior and tackles, all together. Do I settle on the Texans? I'm going with the Texans here, where you have Laken Tomlinson and Cam Robinson on the left side of a remade offensive line, and Titus Howard kicking inside the play guard, and they got some options between Jared Patterson and Juice Scruggs at center, and then a couple of day 2 draft choices in Ariante Ursary and Blake Fisher potentially at right tackle. Trent Brown, does he make the roster? Like Ed Ingram, there's a lot of options, but I don't look at the combinations of any of the options and feel like, hey, I think this is going to be a group that new coordinator, new names, new offense. It's a lot. And as a result, I went with the Texans.
People are going to think that we looked at each other's notes.
We did not.
Because I also picked the Texans, which obviously you outlined kind of the personnel and the questions there. But how disappointing is this to be the team that did so much to overhaul your offensive line, and both of us landed on Houston, and I didn't think about Houston for another position. I think the rest of their team's really good. But you just wonder, is this going to be something that holds back a team that I think there's a lot of expectations for and a lot of curiosity for how CJ Stroud can develop in year 3 and a new coordinator and a ton of changing on the offensive line. But is it better? And we'll find out. It's going to be rooted in their young players and how they evolve. But it's certainly the group that I have the most questions about, which, after this offseason, that's probably not where Houston wanted to be. But they need to prove that the decisions they made were right. And until that happens, I've got a lot of questions.
I also gave some consideration to Cincinnati. I think their tackles kind of give you a certain ceiling, and then Ted Karras, I think, gives you a little bit more of a floor. But I ultimately went, because of all the new, I went with Houston. I'll let you go first at defensive tackle. Let's see if we can get off the schneid here with mirroring each other's picks. I know what I made, and I'm hoping you pick something different, but I'm also not optimistic because I thought this one was pretty straightforward.
I like the 2 young players that they drafted. I like Alfred Collins and CJ West, but those guys haven't taken a snap in the NFL. And your other options are, Jordan Elliott is like your main player there. That's the most proven in the NFL. I don't see a lot of established players. I see some young, intriguing players, but not necessarily not necessarily, not at all. There's no proof of concept at all. And, I think Alfred Collins is going to be a really good run defender, but does he give you anything as a pass rusher? And then, CJ West is a bit of an outlier in terms of the size. I like him. I thought he was a really fun player to watch, but there's a question about that projection. So 49ers are the team at D tackle that I thought was for me the easy choice. I thought about the Chargers a little bit. I thought about the Texans a little bit. Thought a little bit about the Saints, but this is where I landed.
I'm with the Chargers here, where Deshaun Hand, Tier Tart, Tito Agbanya, Naquan Jones, third-round rookie Jamari Caldwell, Scott Matlock, Christopher Hinton, Justin Igboigbe. That's 8 names. And I don't particularly like the idea of any of them serving as starters. So Jamari Caldwell, I think, can develop into a really fun player, an impactful player, as maybe not a big-time pass rush threat, but I did Deshaun Hand and Tier Tart last offseason with training camp. They were part of the shotgun shell approach that the Dolphins threw at the interior defensive line. And Tart runs up and down, hot and cold. I think Hand's become a nice role player. But I just look at this group, and at least with San Francisco, I think they've got I get more excited about Alfred Collins, and I know he hasn't played, but I get more excited about feeling I can translate Alfred Collins' game to the next level versus the entirety of this group and feeling like I feel really good about what I'm going to battle with.
The only thing missing from the Chargers is Neville Gallimore, and they'd have had the whole crew.
Right. Yeah. And Jonathan Harris. You could keep going down the list. They had like a dozen guys last year. All right. I'll be stunned if we're different on this one. The edge group. I'm going to Tennessee Titans. Tennessee, they've moved on from Harold Landry this offseason. Their big player is Femi Oladejo, who's played on the edge for 10 games in his college career before he back off a linebacker. But he's the critical player in the room to go with Arden Key. And they signed Jihad Ward once, Lorenzo Carter retired. Draymond Jones, Ali Gay. Like, in real life, this will be offset in a big way by Jeffrey Simmons and what he can do, but it's not a package deal. Like, he's not coming with him for this thought exercise. It's Oladejo, Draymond Jones, Arden Key, and Jihad Ward. Like, that to me is pretty easy.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Edge group in the NFL.
I'm with you. It'd been weird if I said something else after you went on that soapbox there. It would have been real weird.
Real awkward.
That's why the conversations with Tennessee was like, when the number one pick is, hey, if you don't like Cam Ward, you could definitely pick Abdul Carter here, and that would make a lot of sense based on the construction here. Yeah, I think this is going to be a flaw in this team. I think their scheme will help them. It's part of that McDonald sim pressure unit that we're expecting. And like you mentioned, Jeffrey Simmons is a big part of this equation. But in a vacuum, this edge group is comfortably the most lacking across the league, and I'm not surprised that we were in lockstep on that one.
All right. Well, we're going to do the back 7 on the other side of the break. Our last 3 groups so far, Joe and I, one team apiece in segments 1 and 2 that we've differed on. We've got 3 left. We'll see if maybe we can get 1 or 2 more different across the board. We have the opportunity, and there's one for sure that's going to be different because you've already used my pick at linebacker. I'll tell you that. That's on the other side of the break. Make sure you guys stick with us.
We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show that you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Ever wonder what your view will actually look like before you buy? The app shows you a panoramic sea view, so there are no surprises. And speaking of no surprises, with Game Time, the price you see is the price you pay. There's no hidden fees. So take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Joe, the floor is yours. The linebacker position, off-ball stack linebackers. Your choice for your non-star team is whomst?
This was the team, or excuse me, the position where I just felt like there were so many teams I wanted to use. I wanted to use the Cowboys. I wanted to use the Titans. I wanted to use the Raiders. And that I wanted to use those teams for other positions. Like I had to use the Titans for edge. I had to use the Raiders for where I'm going to use them coming up. The Cowboys, I had to use them for running back. But I thought the Rams have these other teams where it's Omar Spates, Troy Reeder, Nate Landman. You know, I mean, they've done well to get by with
Sean Dolac Lander.
I know.
You're in Western New York. He went to school right down the road.
Poop Paul too, man. I'm slandering all these guys. Yeah, I'm uncomfortable with the group, Kyle. So the Rams were a team that, because I wanted to use all the other contenders in other spots, they made sense. I mean, even the Panthers, right, with Josie Jewell's retirement, like, what do we have? Maybe that's where you're about to go. That would be for a receiver. So linebacker for me is the Rams.
The Panthers are my pick at linebacker, and I
just thought about that
departure and Trevor Wallace and Christian Roseboom with Jacoby Windman and Claude,
former Rams legend Christian Roseboom.
Like the 1 through 5 here is, it's like, okay, in a perfect world, maybe 2 of these guys make your roster.
Yeah,
and so it really, that left them in a tough spot for me. I remember writing a story. I think it was back at the end of May. I was like, hey, if Jermaine Pratt shakes loose, like, I think this team should go get Jermaine Pratt. And obviously that was before the Josie. I have Carolina. I have a feeling we're going to be the same with the cornerback position because you've teased the Raiders several times.
It's time.
It's time to use the Raiders. I also have the Raiders. Go ahead. I'll let you get into it. And then what might be fun, since we have a little bit of time on the back end after we do safeties, is kind of talk about teams that we consider the most for spots, and maybe that paints a picture for team outlooks and what kind of build and all that kind of stuff.
So the Raiders were going to war with Eric Stokes, Corian Bennett. I obviously leaned heavily into our assessments of the players, and your CB1 is a quality depth player, and we're counting on growth for Jacorian Bennett, who was obviously rough, and I don't think that this Raiders defensive ecosystem lends itself well for a player. You know, he's counting on pass rush. He's counting on linebackers and their spacing and safeties, and there's just not enough around him. So I think it's in a tough spot for a young player, but I see questions all over this group, especially now that, you know, Wilkins isn't there. They're not going to get what they imagined out of that. It's like Max Crosby up front. We hope Malcolm Kuntz doesn't get injured. So I know that that's talking about D-line to talk about corners, but I think there's a relationship for how that rush complements the coverage, and I think this coverage is going to be really, really stressed. And I'm not convinced there's a starting caliber player.
Darian Porter might low-key be the most important third-round pick of any player in the draft as far as like that unit's health and viability this year, because the veteran group is just question mark after question mark, or maybe there's raw athletic talent, but it hasn't been established thus far. So I think that's a great call out. Let's go to safety. This is our last opportunity for different. You have not used the team that I have in this spot.
So it's
on the table. I went with the Jacksonville Jaguars.
So did I.
Okay, yeah, so we're on the same page here. Darnell Savage, Eric Murray, Antonio Johnson, 2 rookies. I really like Caleb Bransall. I think he's a exciting, explosive athlete with some corner safety, viability, flexibility, playing the nickel. But what are you going to get there realistically this year? And Savage has just not been the player that he was when he first kind of came into the league and flashed a little bit, where maybe you thought he was going to elevate his play. And Antonio Johnson, once upon a time, was a really attractive, like big safety slot overhang type player, and you just haven't seen those leaps yet. So if you're gonna have 5 make the roster, maybe Andrew Wingard makes it onto the roster as a big time special teams guy and a quality depth player in that regard. But I just don't think the ceiling or the floor of the starters is where you'd like it to be based off what we currently know about those players.
Yeah, it's the only projected starting pair that we don't even have a starting caliber grade on either player, right? They're both labeled as quality depth players, and I think that's the young draft picks. But I think safety is a tough position to come in and start with all the intricacies of what's on the plate of an NFL safety and all the different things that you have to do. And so you're telling me you're just trotting out there 2 quality depth players. I think that's a tough sell. So again, the young players that they have is where you should find hope if you're a Jaguars fan. But Savage and Murray those are depth players, and they're going to start.
I also think the real life pressure will get spread to the linebackers, and they have a good linebacker room. So yeah, I would expect the menu that those guys are able to fulfill on the second level will maybe aid some of that for them as well. I'll be honest, after the Wilkins departure, I thought about the Raiders for probably every spot other than edge on defense.
It's concerning, right? I mean, we don't have to get into the dynamics of that situation, but bottom line is that's a huge asset that they were counting on. That, I mean, it might go down as one of the worst free agent signings in NFL history.
I mean, he got $20 million this year already, and then is still owed another 8 that's under dispute as far as guaranteed salary. Played 5 games, played 250 snaps. It's brutal.
Is it worse than the Albert Hainsworth deal?
Oh man, that's a show. But Wilkins' departure leaves him with Adam Butler, who has become a nice player. But if he's your best defensive tackle,
yeah, it's good rush
to go with Lecky Fotu, Zach Carter, Tonka Hemingway, JJ Pegues, Jonah Lualu, like Keandre Coburn, who they picked up off of waivers from Tennessee. Like, come on now. Like, that's a problem group. Thank goodness they picked up Jermaine Pratt, because if it was Elandon Roberts, Devin White, and Tommy Eichenberg, top 3 linebackers, I'd have picked them in there too. I'd have broke my rules and picked them twice.
You kind of feel like the Raiders are embracing a certain style of play with what they want to be, drafting an action control, but they're not going to play I'd be stunned if they had a defense that can pull its weight for that type of complementary football to give them a winning script. And, I think they're going to wind up having to throw the ball a lot more than they want to. And I think it's going to be hard for them on defense to stay in games. How
about neither one of us had the Cleveland Browns at any of these spots? We had 20 opportunities combined to get the Browns on here. We got them none.
Where'd you think about it? My consideration was wide receiver. But I think that's the thing about the Browns. They have like some level of a veteran that you like at every, just about every spot. Maybe linebacker, I thought about him as well, with the JOK not available, and didn't Jordan Hicks retired?
Yeah,
kind of. That's worth calling out. Yeah, we didn't use him.
I think there was some consideration in quarterback as well with and the Panthers. I had consideration for it, both wide receiver and tight end and at linebacker. It surprised me because, like, you've seen the renovation of that roster and how they've gotten really aggressive, and they've gone after talent the last 2 years in free agency, and I do think their floor is much higher. So it just surprised me to see 3 position rooms where I sat down. I can only use each team once. To have 3 separate spots that popped up for them was a little surprising to me.
Was there a team that you used that you view as a legit Super Bowl contender that you're surprised has a position group that is even in this type of conversation? Like, I use the Rams for linebacker. That doesn't feel good. Texans for offensive line. That's a team that I think has hopes.
Texans probably. I think the Texans are probably the team that. No, the Chargers. Defensive tackle for the Chargers, where you look at what they did in a lot of others. The skill group with, and obviously Mike Williams retires, so that throws you a little bit of a curveball, but they overhaul running back and they added numerous wide receivers and numerous tight ends, and they add multiple offensive linemen that we think would be sufficient level starters between Mekhi Becton and Andre James. But that was the group that was a really strong backbone of what they had, and they brought Jesse Minter back, so they didn't change a lot there. I think the Chargers having that group, especially for Denzel Perryman's still ticking, but Henley's a guy who I think the more you can protect him, the better he's going to play. And to have a group in front that it's like, I don't know, like, can they play the dirty work style of football? Sure. But if they're going to catch a bunch of duo and inside zone and teams that want to run downhill and physically challenge them, I think that could be a tough draw for them.
Do you have a group here that obviously you've highlighted as one of the worst in the league that you feel like is not really a concern based on other factors in play with that team? You know, we kind of got into this with several, but is there one that really stands out as like, hey, we highlighted this, but it's probably inconsequential?
I think the three skill groups are probably the best chance you have at that, with Arizona because of what their tight end, and they play heavy, right? Like that, if there's a team that's mitigated or that's built to kind of mitigate 2, 3, 4 wide receiver that you get excited about, it's probably Arizona. Dallas with their offensive line investments I did last year.
Yeah.
And then Miami, their offense ran a lot more through Jonnu Smith in probably some unhealthy ways due to some of the other warts on the offense that I think they've kind of looked to correct. And then they brought back a lot of the rest of the skill group while upgrading the interior of their offensive line to hopefully be a little bit more robust. And then if you're going to get the ball to somebody underneath, I think it can be Devon Achane a lot of the time.
Let's say Cowboys at running back, Dolphins at tight end. But I also had the Rams at linebacker, which, I mean, they've been living in this world for a while now. I mean, the one year they had Bobby Wagner was like the worst year they had recently. So I think they're going to be okay. I think they made a calculated choice with the direction there.
Joe Marino, that is going to do it for us here today on the show. Kyle Crabbs, Joe Marino, locked on NFL scouting. We have built our non-star teams, and maybe back to a little optimism tomorrow on the show. Oh, but I hope you don't I hope nobody saw the title and got offended that their team was included here, because there was some strategy involved, and right on cue, Brian Schottenheimer, while we were recording, starting to feel Phil Maffa, he said.
Whoever had that tape, boy, I'll
get
tell
ready
you.
to spike the ball. So
get ready.
That's going to do it for us here on Monday, July 28th. Kyle Crabbs, Joe Marino, locked on NFL scouting in the books. Come on back. See you again soon.